Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Matt Filipovitz. Matt, they won the football game.
Somehow, some way, Penn State is 1-0. Very, very stressful start, but I will take it because I feel like nothing derails hype around a season more than like an opening loss, and I feel like nothing can project excitement like a opening win on the road against a Power 5 team. So good spot to be in if you're Penn State.
Yeah, Penn State has evidently decided that playing normal season openers is just never going to be a thing they do, in part because the Big Ten keeps scheduling them on the road for Big Ten games, and they're starting the season with Big Ten games going forward. The Nittany Lions, of course, picked up a thrilling 35-31 win in West Lafayette against the Purdue Boilermakers on Thursday night. It was Matt, how'd you feel about having your entire Saturday to yourself? Because, heading into the season, I was like, listen, I don't know if I love this. I don't like playing on a Thursday. I love being a part of college football Saturday. But let me tell you this, brother. Once it became time for me to kick my feet up at noon on Saturday and I had nothing else to do, it was like, yeah, I can actually kind of get used to this.
It was great. I was going to be worried that it was going to be like a slow start because the nooners were kind of bad. But the North Carolina schools decided to go on ahead and forget how to play football. So that was at least exciting. But it was good. I actually really liked having that time off and having that Friday off too to watch some of those games. It was, I don't know if I do it often, but to start a season, I will take a little bit of an extra free Saturday, more or less.
Yeah, I would like it if their Thursday games going forward were a little
easier,
little less dramatic. I'm trying to think. Past Thursday games they've had, I know in 2019, I think they played either a Thursday or Friday game against Illinois. They didn't in 2021. 2020 didn't happen. It was 2019. They went to Maryland in the game where Sean Clifford and KJ Hamler made it rain on them. And then the year before that, 2018, they played against Illinois. So it's a thing that has caused a bit of consternation among Penn State fans. I know the Big Ten deciding they're going to move in more of that direction with a few more of these sprinkled into the schedule. But generally, it was nice having Saturday to just chill. What wasn't necessarily nice was having to sit through this damn football game. Penn State, again, won 35-31. It was not particularly easy. The Nittany Lions took a lead into the picked up the lead early in the fourth quarter after Sean Clifford touchdown pass to Keandre Lambert-Smith. Get a 3-and-out after that, and then Sean Clifford throws a pick six to put Purdue ahead 31-28. Matt, if you asked me in that moment, what's going to happen after this, even without knowing that Penn State's next two drives would be 4 plays and then a punt and then a 3-and-out, right when that pick six happened, I just felt my heart sink. I thought Penn State were dead to rights at that point.
I thought that was the end of the Clifford era. Honest to God, in that moment, I thought they were going to pull the plug. I thought they were going to hand the reins over to Drew Aller. And I thought we were going to just shift what we thought this season would be. But that wasn't the case. And Sean Clifford, I got to give the guy credit, man. I don't know how he does this, but there's multiple times now where he just finds a way to get that win late in games. It happened, going back to like Iowa 2019. Didn't happen a ton in 2020, but that didn't really happen. He did enough for Wisconsin. Like he if he was stayed healthy, he would have done enough for Iowa. Like he's done this multiple times. He's not a perfect quarterback, but I mean, you just have to, tip your cap to him. He found a way to get the job done, and that's all you could ask for in week one.
Yeah, we mentioned this on the Instagram, not the Instagram, the Twitter space that we did after the game, which, real quick, thank you so much to everyone who participated in that, whether you were sending in questions and hopping on to talk with myself.
There was a lot of people in there, I saw.
Yeah, there were a lot of people hopping in there. It was really great to talk to a bunch of Penn State fans. We hope that we're going to get more and more opportunities to do those sorts of things throughout the season. Obviously, the very unique circumstances surrounding this game made it a little easier, but man, I said it on the Twitter space, but Gus Johnson mentioned something that Clifford said after. Clifford said before the game, he mentioned it at the very end of the game or after Penn State's drive, whatever it was. And it was something to the extent of Sean Clifford believes that he is always one deep breath away from going out there and leading a drive like that last drive that he led. And, Clifford he did a nice job on the drive. I thought Mike Yurcich called a spectacular drive. I don't think they asked him to do too terribly much, and it was a lot of pretty easy throws that, a point that Nick made, and I completely agree with. Sometimes I think he can be his own worst enemy with how he'll overthink some things, and they kind of took that element out of it. But all in all, just, man, the way they ended up winning that football game, the resiliency that they showed, the fight that they showed, the way the defense bore down. We're going to spend a decent amount of time talking about the defense. Don't worry. It was that was about as good of the defense allowed 24 points, about as good of a 24 points and 426 yards allowed as I think you're going to get. But Matt, let's start with just our general thoughts. I mean, we've talked a bit about Clifford. We've talked a bit about that pick six, that final drive, but let's take an even bigger step back. Just give our general thoughts about this game, and then anything else you might want to yammer on about.
Yeah, they survived, and in week one, it's a clunker week. There's no preseason. This is your first true live action you're going to have, so you're going to make mistakes. It's going to look gross. And Penn State was in the unfortunate situation where they had to go on the road to face a 24-year-old starting quarterback, and they had to do so coming off a season where the stakes were impossibly high because of the result of that season. So for them to come out there, not play the best game, and still sneak out a win is just beyond impressive. So just a lot of credit goes to them for getting the job done. The young guy stepped up. The old guy, what is it?
So, I don't know if you looked at Sean Clifford's Instagram story literally any time in the last 5 minutes, but there was as everyone knows, Sean Clifford left the game at one point, and
he totally had to.
Yes, well, Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt thought it was his knee. He said after the game it was, he wasn't feeling particularly great. Twitter account at CJ0. If you don't follow CJ tweets out a ton of videos, tons of pictures, stuff like that. He tweeted out, Sean Clifford absolutely had diarrhea. And just a few moments ago, Clifford shared that tweet to his Instagram account, added dude wipes, and just said NIL deal.
Oh, I figured it was that. The way he was running, I figured it was something like that.
I have cracked enough jokes about dude wipes on Twitter that they now follow me. So Sean, on the off chance that you listen to this, I will do everything I can to facilitate this, my guy. But nice. I apologize. Please continue, Matt.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, you won a clunker. You rotated a ton, which I was really excited about. Like, you've got a ton of dudes' experience. What was the number we had it at? Was it 7 true freshmen got on the field? Which I don't think that's ever been a number we've hit on the road in a Big Ten game for Penn State, especially in a season opener, no less. To have, is it 7? It was
Aller? 7. Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter, and boy, can I not wait to talk about Abdul Carter. Katron Allen, Drew Aller, Omari Evans, Zane Durant, and Denai Denison.
Yeah, so it was just a great mix of the youth coming out there showing they can play. And then it was the vets who went out there and made the big plays to win them the game. It was Sean Clifford, Kayvon Lee, who has gotten a lot of crap from a lot of people, and some of it rightfully so, considering, we saw a lot from Singleton and Allen, but he made the play. Mitchell Tinsley, Brenton Strange, it was these upperclassmen that made those big plays, but it was the underclassmen that kept them in the game. So, overall, just generally, I'm not ever going to be mad at a week 1 win, especially when that is on the road at night against a Power 5 opponent that just won 9 games. So only positives for me overall. So there's definitely things I can nitpick, but if the issues are still there heading into Auburn, then I'll feel a little bit more concerned about it. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with how things turned out.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of how much Penn State has had to get sorted out this offseason. You look at the running backs, it's basically they're getting 2 brand new players who have never played college football before involved. They lost their guy that caught passes. They lost Jahan Dotson and replaced him for all intents and purposes with a guy who was at Western Kentucky last year. Offensive line has some new contributors and guys who are being thrust into larger roles. And then on the defensive side of the football, literally the entire defensive line, their best defensive line is Maryland transfer, guy who didn't play last year, guy whose season ended due to injury, guy who didn't play last year. The linebackers, Curtis Jacobs was a dude last year. It is then Jonathan Sutherland next to him, and then
who played great,
who had himself a nice game, and a combination of guys who did not really play all that much last year. The secondary, very good. I thought they were the strong point of the game, but that whole defense adds the caveat of new defensive coordinator who wants to do new things. And I think there were some times where we saw that Penn State was figuring new things out. And when you think about what Penn State was able to control in that football game, it was all with that context around it. I thought Purdue played a really good game. I think Purdue did what they wanted to do. I think you're going to be able to people are going to point to things like Charlie Jones, 12 receptions, 153 yards. He was the guy Joey Porter.
He outgained Iowa. He outgained the entire Iowa offense.
I don't think that's particularly impressive, but okay. But you look at something like that, and I think people are going to point to that and say, yeah, Joey Porter Jr. didn't have a great game. He scored one. Purdue's entire game plan was, we are going to throw the football. Throwing the ball is going to essentially be our running game. Purdue averaged 12.3 yards per reception. They averaged 3 yards per gain. And I believe two of the guys who carried the ball for them for their two longest gains, Tyrone Tracy, 9 yards, TJ Sheffield, 7 yards, and I think Sheffield had the fumble, were both wide receivers. Their running backs were 15 carries, 57 yards, 3.8, 4, 14, 3.5. They could not run the football. Everything they were trying to do was the running game, was through the air. And despite that, they got one touchdown through the air. So I think this is going to be one of those games where, yes, obviously stuff to clean up. But when I think of what Penn State, the hints that we got about what Penn State were as a football team, Matt, and correct me if I'm wrong, the hints of what Penn State was as a football team last year in the Wisconsin game. We saw they were a team that was going to have a very, very good defense, but it was going to have the caveat of, I just don't think this offense is going to be able to get it done. Here, I think the good stuff that we saw here might, at least on the offense side of the ball, might be more promising than we saw out of the Wisconsin game. So let's kind of go back and forth between those two before we dive into some other thoughts. But this is the second year in a row that Penn State has gone on the road in a tough environment and beaten a team in their own building. How do you feel about this win compared to Penn State's win against Wisconsin last year in terms of, when we look back on Wisconsin, we could see some things that were red flags. Do you think that there's anything here that has the potential to kind of pop up like that?
I still don't love what I saw from the running game. But I will say, one thing I really did like is that their ability to run with Singleton and Allen, and to a lesser extent Lee, was more respected by this Purdue defense, and I think that opened up some good throwing lanes. So that's a big step forward. And I have this stat pulled up right here. So Penn State averaged 3.1 yards per carry in this game, and that's bad. Like, I'm not gonna say that is good or that's impressive or that's promising. Agreed. But that would have been their fourth best performance in the Big Ten last year, is that 3.1. The only ones that would have beaten that were the Indiana blowout, which I think featured the longest run of the season with the Kayvon Lee scamper. The Iowa game,
that was 40 some odd yards, correct?
Something like that. So it inflated it like crazy, I'm sure. You have the Iowa game where they played the second half with a quarterback who did not know how to throw the football. And the last one is the Rutgers game where Sean Clifford and everybody else had the flu, and a true freshman quarterback went out there and game managed. So take that for what it's worth. I'm not the kind of guy who likes to have caveats in there, but that's promising. It's a step in the right direction. It's not great. It's not perfect, but I will take that. That's just something they can build upon as they figure out what offensive line combination works well. I think we're going to see a lot more Bryce Effner going forward. I loved what I saw out of Hunter Norzad. Man, what a find he was, man. And I think Tengwell's only going to get better with those reps. And then one last thing I want to make sure I highlight here when compared to the Wisconsin game. Do you know how many Penn State players caught passes in the Wisconsin game? Do you remember?
It was like 4.
It was 4. Do you know how many caught them for Penn State this week?
I have it up in front of me, so I'm not going to say that, but go ahead.
It's 8. So right off the bat, you have this expansion of talent that Clifford feels comfortable getting the ball out to. That doesn't even consider the fact that Theo Johnson did not play in this game for one reason or another. We think it's injury. He was there in street clothes. Hopefully he's ready to go, and this was just precautionary. But still, right off the bat, that idea that defenses will not have the quote-unquote Jahan Dotson to just glue to should open up a lot more opportunities for these tight ends, which I think played a really good game. Rough drops, but overall pretty good. This receiving core, which, KLS, man, what a comeback with that catch. That's a big-time play. I hope that's a springboard.
Let me tell you this. Mitchell Tinsley.
Dog.
We'll talk about him a bit, certainly.
Yeah. And Parker Washington, you got the backs, out in space. That pass to Lee was beautiful. Like, great route by him. I love the no gloves. Like, I think Kayvon Lee had a tweet that he's never wearing gloves again. I think that's pretty funny. But there's a lot more for me to be excited about. Like, I think we're really fixating on the fact that it was close and it felt like a loss and probably should have been a loss. Like, coulda, shoulda, woulda, doesn't matter in the win and loss column. Penn State went out there. They found a way to win the game, and the offense did, granted, barely enough, but Penn State left a lot of plays out there themselves. Like even the Clifford pick 6, that was schemed really well. Tinsley was wide open. He just airmailed it, which I don't love. Joey Porter Jr. dropped a should-be pick 6 like that. And then on that possession, they go down there. At least ball inside the 9. At least ball inside the 10.
I disagree with should be pick 6. I disagree.
Okay, all right.
I would go as far as to say I don't necessarily agree that should have been a pick.
Okay, all right, that's fair. But still, he should have picked that ball off, and instead, Purdue goes on the field, scores a field goal. That's a 10-point swing potentially. So there were a lot of plays left out there. But again, those will be cleaned up. I think Ohio can now be really interesting in the fact that you're not trying to figure out what the team is; you're trying to perfect the team now in week 2. So I think that could be a really good stepping stone into the Auburn game coming up here pretty quickly all of a sudden.
Yeah. One thing I will say about just real quick, shout out to the Ohio Bobcats. They played Florida Atlantic this past weekend, picked up a 41-38 win, and I have a couple of friends who were Bobcats. They told me this was the first time since 2018 that Ohio has won a football game in the month of September. So
cool.
Good for them. Fun little thing. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it. At some point, the opportunity to do that just popped up. The stuff that I felt, it's weird. Penn State's defense, like you could just tell it's not going to be the Penn State defense that they had last year. I think not having a guy like Arnold Ebiketie in particular who could just consistently dog a quarterback means that you're just not going to have that. Maybe they're able to get, move in the right direction. I said to a friend after the game, Penn State's defensive line did not, he's a Michigan fan. He said Penn State's secondary played an excellent game, especially considering Penn State's defensive line didn't get pressure. And then I basically just rattled off what I did about their best 4-man unit and how I think they're going to get better throughout the year. But they went into West Lafayette against a pass-happy offense on a quarterback who wants to get the ball out, boom, 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 and barely got pressure on him. But it still didn't matter because the secondary did such a good job keeping him out of the end zone. So, as we're kind of getting into where we felt best against Penn State's performance, that's where I think I'm going to, that's the big place where I am going to land, is that the defense put forth, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the best 24-point allowed and 426-yard performance I think they could. Purdue had 6 yards reception, 6 yards per pass by O'Connell, 12.3 yards per reception, and 3 yards per carry. That's really good. Yeah. That is really good considering what this defense has to kind of figure out and still learn. This is like their first, when you take Spanish in high school for the first time, this is like their first Spanish test. They're learning a brand new language with a Manny Diaz defense coming in here. And they managed to pass their first test in a very uniquely tricky and difficult test. So I'm really happy about that. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I'm just like, I'm overjoyed that they figured out a way to pull this out of thin air. Like we'll have a Sean Clifford conversation in a bit, I'm sure. If I told the average Penn State fan going into this game that Sean Clifford was going to complete, let me just get my calculator out here really quickly. Boop, 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 boop. 54% of his passes, not great, but he would have 282 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air, another touchdown on the ground, and Penn State would win the football game. I think every single Penn State fan going into this game would be overjoyed. Every single one would go, oh, then I'm like, that's great. There was some Sean Cliffordiness to it, and I think that's going to cause a bit of concern. And again, that's the thing we're going to talk about. But for the most part, when the offense needed to do things, the offense did things. And now it's a matter of, let's no longer make it need to do things. Let's just go out and do things. Mm-hmm. They'll have an opportunity to do that this week against Ohio, but I'm taking some optimism from that. So Matt, where are the areas where you feel the best about Penn State's performance on Thursday night?
Up front, I really liked what I saw. Listen, you're not going to rebuild this offensive line in a day. But one thing I want to make sure I call out is that this Penn State offensive line allowed just 3 tackles for loss. And that would have been the second best performance for this unit in the 13-game slate of last season. The only game they allowed fewer tackles for loss is absolutely insanely to me, the Iowa game. Iowa had 2 tackles for loss against them in 2021. I have no idea how that's even possible considering how that game went. But
my guess, not a lot of tackles for loss, a lot of tackles for no gain.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's probably fair. And again, this actually kind of is like a decent segue into what I want to talk about next, in that the running backs did not break the big one. Like, they did not have those kind of plays we were looking for. But the offensive line got them beyond the line of scrimmage. They got things moving in a positive direction. And again, with a unit that was as bad as it was last year, you need to take baby steps. And I think they took a step in the definitive right direction today on Thursday. Like, they only allowed 1 sack. It was a bad one, and I'll give, I'm sure we'll talk about that later in terms of, how we're going to handle the Caden Wallace, Bryce Effner thing. And Tengwall got blown up on that play too, and then Norzad came in for a pretty good stretch after that. Like, that's on 2 guys essentially. So, but overall, the offensive line I thought took a really nice step in the right direction. Secondary played pretty well. Aiden O'Connell, I think, was a hair over 70% completion last season. Penn State held him to 50%, 20% drop. I will take that any day of the week. So that's a really good space to be in. And these transfers, man, like Barney Amore, Mitchell Tinsley, Chop Robinson.
Barney! Yes.
Yep. Johnny Dixon. Like, people forget Dixon's a transfer too. Like, just because he's not that immediate guy. Yeah. Like, the transfers all played phenomenal roles. I have a point I want to make sure I dog ear on Chop. I'll bring it up. I know we're going to do a little bit of a mailbag. I'll bring something up regarding Chop during that. But I like what I saw out of him. Zakee Wheatley, turnover king. Love it. Kalen King eliminated a whole other side of the field. Love it. Pinniger, 5 for 5. Good for him. Like, we had kicking problems. No doubt, Indiana 2020 in game 1, and then Stout Indiana in 2020, and then Stout in 2021. There were opening game kicking problems, and Pinniger 5 for 5 on extra points. So, hey, good for him. So, a lot to like, a lot just to build on. This is not a finished product yet, and it doesn't have to be, which is the best part.
Yeah, the one thing I want to respond to was with the running backs not breaking the big one. Or, Katron Allen 3.9 yards per carry, Nick Singleton 2.4 yards per carry. One thing that I think is worth mentioning, and this is something that will come with time and reps for them particularly, is this was probably the first football game that these guys have played in a while where they were not able to just physically overwhelm the other team and the other team's players, where it wasn't we give the ball to Katron and Nick and they just go out there and are better than the guys on the other team because, well, they just are. So that is the thing I want to pay attention to as we're moving on this season. But overall, have to be happy with the fact that Penn State was able to come out with the win. Before we get into some more stuff, I want to thank the sponsor of our podcast, Home Field Apparel. Of course, if you are a college sports fan on the internet, you know what Home Field Apparel is. If you are not, Home Field is a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis, right in the heart of Big Ten country. They're Hoosiers. Good for them on the win this week. I apologize to them for having to listen to Tim Brando, but otherwise, congratulations to Indiana on winning this week, and Home Field Apparel for getting to say they saw Indiana win this week. Their shirts are comfortable, very unique. They take the time to make sure that the shirts that you get make you feel closer to your school. Some of the things that I've seen from them are really awesome. Matt, you have a couple Home Field things, correct?
I do, and I wore one. I went out to a bar, one of the Penn State bars here in Chicago, and some dude in the bathroom, when I was washing my hands, goes, "Hey, is that a Home Field shirt?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, yes it is. Use promo code Roar Lions Roar at checkout on your first order." I actually did do that, so shout out to that guy. So yeah, I love the Home Field stuff. Their stuff is super cool. I was the only person at the bar in my specific designs. That was cool to kind of have that unique shirt, because I feel like a lot of people just have those, old school We Are Penn State shirts. So yeah, love Home Field, love their stuff. I tried to wear the sweatshirt today. Well, I did wear it to the grocery store, and I walk there, so I get hot. And when I carry my groceries back, and I made it 2 blocks before I had to take it off. But it was very cozy. Yeah, it was a bummer. I was trying to flaunt it, but
I wore my "Take Me to Happy Valley" shirt during the game. That will be that will be a constant in my game day experience this year. As you can tell, there is Penn State apparel in Home Field's line of merchandise. They had their promotion Big New Saturday, which was they would launch a new school. Penn State ended up doing the best single day Big New Saturday that they have had. It is no longer a thing. Penn State is forever number one. But if you didn't get any Penn State stuff during that, there are 15 pieces of apparel in their Penn State line. If you are a new customer, if you have never purchased from Home Field Apparel before, use the promo code Roar Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Again, promo code Roar Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Thank you to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this podcast. Now let's get back into talking about Penn State's win over Purdue. And Matt, let's talk about areas where we are a little bit concerned with Penn State's performance on I keep wanting to say Saturday. It's just not. I might say Saturday a few times on this pod, just because it's burrowed into my head that that's when college football is. So
it's all the same.
It is. Areas of concern from Thursday night with Penn State's performance.
So there's one big one, and I think it's the one that you expect. It's the interception. It's Sean Clifford. It's year 6. The guy was open. He didn't try to force it into a window. He couldn't. He had time. He wasn't really under pressure. This was a moment in the game where everybody in the stadium figured they were going to run, because it was directly off of a Kayvon Lee, I think like 8 or 9 or 10 yard scamper, and you're trying to kill the clock. The guy was wide open and he airmailed it. And I'm not calling for Clifford's head, but we saw Drew Aller. We saw him out there. I think he's the first freshman to see game action on the road in a Big Ten game since Hackenberg. And I think just the second this millennium, the other one probably being Rob Bolden back in 2010. So rarefied air already. Is it air you want to be in? Probably not. But shout out Rob Bolden. We have to have the conversation sooner or later. I don't know if it has to. If Aller lights up Ohio, we're probably going to have the conversation again. Clifford won them the game. I want to make sure I get that established. This win does not happen unless Sean Clifford is there. He cannot make that throw again, or I think you have to really consider making the move. And I don't want to get into this whole our Clifford discussion, but I mentioned this today in our Slack. We were talking about it. Clemson went out there and they had a situation where they had Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence. And Kelly Bryant played well. He was winning them games. Dabo made the switch to Trevor Lawrence. And what happened to Clemson? They won the national title. USC had Max Brown and Sam Darnold. Max Brown struggled. They went to Sam Darnold. They went to the Rose Bowl. One of those dudes made the call at the proper time, and it won them a national title. The other one didn't, and that one was Clay Helton. And I don't think we have to do it yet. I don't think we have to do it next week. But I think this conversation is something we have to be prepared to have if Clifford makes one more throw like that to lose them a game or to put them in a deficit that's going to require another Herculean effort to get out of. So I didn't like that. Again, great that he bounced back. Like that's part of the full story. But in terms of things that you cannot fix, I don't think at this point you can fix those throws out of Clifford because it was just a bad throw, and I get everyone has them. But at year 6, in that situation, I hate seeing that bad of a throw.
So I'll respond with basically two things. One, at the time when Kelly Bryant got pulled, what we had seen from that point was a little bit more of a willingness to go to Trevor Lawrence. And that's why I think it happened. I mean, during the season, they played a game against Texas A&M at Texas A&M. And if I remember correctly, maybe Bryant got hurt. I don't remember, but like they had a bit of a data point, an extended data point on Bryant. And by the time they played against Georgia Tech and they pulled Bryant to put Lawrence in, they had already kind of known, and Bryant had not been a good quarterback to that point. That season where he got replaced, he had fewer touchdowns in 4 games than Sean Clifford had against Purdue. And that's why I think that's a little bit different, because Bryant legitimately was not getting the job. Like he was actively he was not doing nearly enough to win. And yes, that was a bad throw by Clifford. We'll talk about that more and more, I'm sure. But he was also able to, again, throw for nearly 300 yards, 5 total touchdowns to win the football game. And the difference with Max Brown was the way that season started. USC got throttled by Alabama. They played a game against Utah State where they won comfortably, and then they lost to Stanford. They were 1-2. They were losing football games. They decided to make the decision. So that just why I think it's a little bit off. Mm-hmm. And then the more broad point, which is, I think arguing about whether or not Sean Clifford is going to get benched is like arguing whether or not the sun is going to rise tomorrow morning, which is, sure, maybe something crazy can happen, but it's just baked in at this point. Like, I feel like this is a conversation that fans have, but everyone in the program, like, it's not even on their minds at this point. I don't know that for sure. It's possible that I'm wrong. That is just the wager that I am willing to make, because you don't make that kind of super ultra drastic change unless something requires a super ultra drastic change. And I don't think this game indicated that Penn State needs that.
I agree. Right.
We have a question about this in a bit. We'll talk about it then. What I'll say for me, my area of concern was Penn State's linebacker play, or Penn State's front 7 play in general. I think that the defensive line is going to figure some stuff out. I mean, you look at snap counts from PFF as assembled by Blue White Illustrated. It's very obvious who they think their 4 dudes are along the defensive line. Hakeem Beamon had 51 snaps. PJ Mustipher had 50 snaps. The next closest guy at defensive tackle was Devon Ellies. Defensive ends, 60 for Adisa Isaac, 57 for Chop Robinson. Next was 42 for Nick Tarver, and then Dennis Sutton with 9. We know who they want out there, and we went through the circumstances under which those guys are there. So I think that this game wasn't really it was really hard for them to succeed, both with how Purdue wanted to play and the circumstances of those guys playing. I am a little bit concerned about the linebackers. I would argue that something like Charlie Jones, 12, 153, and 1 is not necessarily indicative of Joey Porter Jr.'s game, because I thought he played a fantastic game. You know, I thought in the aftermath, there was I can't think of the name of the podcast, but it's hosted by former Pittsburgh Steelers defensive back Ryan Clark. And he asked Derwin James, one of the NFL's best defensive backs, who are the toughest guys to cover in the league? And the first person he said, I think, was Devontae Adams. It was one of those guys you expect. And the guy after that was Hunter Renfrow of the Las Vegas Raiders. Apologies. And his argument was basically, when you have a guy who's that crisp of a route runner, who is that good at getting open, having to cover him is hell. And he was just killing Penn State on slants, on drag routes, on stuff to get him across the middle of the field, in part because Penn State's linebackers were just kind of vacating that space there.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in Curtis Jacobs. I think Jonathan Sutherland had a nice game, all things considered. I think Tyler Elsdon and Kobe King both showed they have ways to go. I think Abdul Carter got kicked out for one of the single worst targeting calls that I've seen in my entire life.
That was bad. That was bad.
If you're not allowed to reach for a football on the ground when the referee hasn't blown their whistle, like, don't play football. Like, you should not be allowed to play football. Like, there was a little earlier in the game, Penn State brought a corner blitz. They threw it over the top. I forget. It might have been to Jones. And Jair Brown had a chance to basically put the guy in the hospital, and he picked no. And it came before the Abdul Carter thing. But when the Abdul Carter thing happened, I basically went, that's why he didn't do it. Because look at how dumb these referees are. They would have tossed him out of the game for that. But on the whole, I think Penn State's linebackers have a way to go. They have it's a unit of almost exclusively new guys. The guys who register snaps at linebacker, Curtis Jacobs, obviously, and then Tyler Elsdon, Jonathan Sutherland, Kobe King, Dom DeLuca, Jamari Budden, Abdul Carter. That group has a way to go. And I think there is a lot of limitations in that group. I think Jacobs is the guy who kind of runs around and erases things. But I think Elsdon and King, as their Mike linebackers, they're going to have to learn a lot in not a lot of time, especially once they go down to Auburn and they're going to run Tank Bigsby at him over and over again. Dom DeLuca played a nice game, but he's a young guy. I mean, he's a walk-on. He has his limitations. Jonathan Sutherland, new to the position, played a nice game, all things considered, but still has his limitations. So that's one thing I'm going to be dog-earing is we go throughout this season. It's just, what do we get out of Penn State's linebackers? Because Penn State's front seven in general, with the caveat that I think the front is going to get better as the year goes along. There were some times, especially on that last play, where you could just tell Chop Robinson fires himself out of a cannon. I think he was more of a 3-4 edge rusher for Maryland last year. So he's learning a new position, putting his hand down in the dirt like that. But you can just tell the talent's there. And then it's a lot of guys who are coming off of injuries and not playing football, so they'll figure some stuff out. But linebackers will figure some stuff out. I know you mentioned you thought Jonathan Sutherland had a good game.
Yeah, I was really impressed with him. I like him in that kind of chaos role. The pass rush is what it is. This is an offense that wants to dink and dunk you. Like, it's the thing that teams did with Shaka Toney and Odafe Owe back in 2020, where they didn't have the sack numbers because they had to get the ball out in like 2.5 seconds. And this is still a young linebacker core. So that's, I think, why the sack numbers weren't really there. And I will say, on two of the plays where Purdue had to run intermediate to deep routes was the Johnny Dixon sack, because they were able to get pressure with a unique blitz. And the other one was the Hail Mary, where Chop Robinson just ate the tackle and forced Aiden O'Connell just to get the ball out, and it didn't even matter because there was zeros on the clock. So I think that's more of a situational thing with the way Purdue plays football, more than it's a reason for excessive concern for the defensive front. But going back to Sutherland, I just thought it's a better role for him. I think he plays better not out in space, and I like that he can kind of create chaos in the pocket when he's able to get behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think it's a good time to start talking about questions, comments, whatnot that listeners sent in for this game. Let's start with DKW. Excuse me. You need to watch the fumble recovery play, which, just aside, what a goddamn play by Zaki Wheatley.
Dude, he's a dog.
We'll talk about this at the end of the question. You need to watch the fumble recovery play and keep your eyes on Joey Porter after the play. He's a weird guy, all in on weird guys. I ended up looking, and he was just like stiff as a board on the ground, as like a celebratory way, not in a I have a concussion way. It was very weird, but you could tell that guy's just wired a little bit differently. Let's talk about that because I tweeted this out. I legitimately think that sequence of Penn State forcing that fumble there and then going down and scoring completely changed the course of the entire football game. I don't think you could say enough good things about that play by Zaki Wheatley, the job that Joey Porter did to shed a block and fall on the ball before it went out of bounds, and then going back the other way, Sean Clifford, when he was just rolled out of the pocket, flicked it downfield to Brenton Strange, and then the effort that Strange did in light of some absolutely abysmal tackling by Purdue.
Yeah, this is what the Diaz defense wants. They want to create plays like this. And it would have been cool to see an interception, but for a guy in the secondary to go out there and make a play in space, like that's just a hell of a play in space for a young guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, Porter was put in a blender for a lot of the night because they just targeted him nonstop. So I think
can I interject there?
Yeah.
I don't think they were targeting him.
I think Kalen King shut it down on the other end?
No.
Okay.
I think that the one guy that Aiden O'Connell completely trusted is Charlie Jones. And if you go back and watch, Porter was just the guy on Charlie Jones.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were targeting Porter. I think they were just trying to feed Jones the football. And candidly, I think Penn State was happy with that because, again, Purdue had one touchdown through the air on the evening. And that one touchdown was to Charlie Jones when he starts that play with Porter, I believe, on him, and then just ends up on the complete other side of the field, and it becomes someone else's job. Like, I think if you look at the 12, 153 and 1 for the guy that Porter was checking, it doesn't seem that impressive, but I think he did exactly what they wanted him to do. And then you add in the 6 pass breakups or whatever he had. I think he had one hell of a game. And Penn State football just announced that he was the defensive play of the game.
Oh, nice. Good
for him. For posterity's sake, offensive players of the game, Kayvon Lee and Olu Fashanu. Defensive player of the game, Joey Porter Jr. Special teams player of the game, Barney Amore. He deserves that.
Yeah, Barney's the man. Good for Barney, man. That's such a cool story. But yeah, I feel like, recovering that fumble has to do wonders for your psyche when, you have a team just nonstop throwing at you, for a whole half. So, good for JPJ, good for Wheatley. Excited to see what that duo does, moving forward. And just curious to see what that secondary actually looks like when they face a little bit more of a balanced passing attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry. I think that's completely fair. I think everyone in that secondary has the exact amount of swagger and our RLR alum, hopefully guy we have on to talk about basketball, Eric Gibson. I think the word he kept using was psychos, which I love.
Yeah, you've got to be a psycho to be a corner.
You do. So I give them a ton of credit. I think Porter played a great game, and I think that sequence won the game for Penn State because at the bare minimum, if they don't force that turnover and go down and score, and it's not 21-10 going into the locker room, it's 14-10. Purdue gets the football out of the break, and Penn State had not just done the sort of thing that takes the air completely out of the stadium. So, I think that was I legitimately think that sequence won the game for Penn State. Let's move on to a few more things. These are very defensive minded. JV3 asks, where were the defensive ends, especially the first 3 quarters? Harry, I feel like I expected more pressure and aggressiveness from the defense. Are they maybe saving some things for later? Ray, the defense definitely struggled to stop the pass. How much of this is a concern? Purdue just doing their thing, adjusting to a new scheme from Diaz, or the defensive line not getting enough pressure. Matt, you can respond to all of those. You can respond broadly, whatever you want to say. It's a lot of stuff that we've touched on, but just giving yourself the opportunity to answer some of that stuff.
It feels like the anchor point of all those questions are a bit of a frustration with the defensive line and their ability to get home. And again, I think that comes back to the way Purdue runs their passing attack. Just in the sense that they run slants, screens. Like Penn State, they view those short passes as an extension of the running game because they have no running game. So I'm not really worried about it yet. Again, it's definitely something I want to make sure that we're watching. But again, anything that they really ran of those intermediate to deep routes, they got sacks on 2 of those plays. And one was a really well-designed corner blitz. Diaz ran a couple corner blitz, which I actually really like. I'm excited to see those dudes eat in space behind the line of scrimmage. And then, again, the other one was Chop Robinson showing that he can be that force. I'm excited to see what it looks like against an Auburn that isn't going to run slants, bubble screens, those quick passes. That's going to look to have plays develop, beyond 5 or 10 yards. So I think we're going to get a much better idea of what that group looks like in, let's say, like late September. But as for right now, like I definitely be concerned about it, but I wouldn't say that this is going to be a unit that takes a massive step back. Because even like you said, like Chop, new to the position as a hand in the dirt edge rusher. PJ Mustipher played, 50 snaps coming off an ACL injury. Good for PJ, man. That's awesome. Hakeem Beamon hasn't played in a year. Adisa Isaac hasn't played in a year. So they're only going to get better. And I think as far as playing against that scheme, they played decently. So we'll take that as a win.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have to. One thing that I know sports fans hate doing, and I'm certainly the kind of person who does it, sometimes you just got to tip your hat to the other team.
Yep.
The way that Purdue plays offense and the way that they are able to throw the football, I mean, it's very impressive. Last year, Purdue had the second best passing attack in the Big Ten. Ohio State was at 381 yards a game. Purdue was at 355, and Purdue was fifth in the Big Ten in total yards per game. They could not run the football at all, and they were fifth in scoring offense as well. Like, this is just what Purdue does, and they were doing it against a defense that is, again, still learning and figuring out what they are doing under their brand new defensive coordinators. So that's kind of my very broad view on things. I think that as the year goes on, they will start to clean some of that stuff up. This was not a game for them to blitz like crazy. So to Harry's question, more pressure and aggressiveness from the defense. I think that if Penn State was blitzing with, 6 or 7 guys, I think they would have been absolutely dead to rights. I mean, The one thing that O'Connell does so spectacularly well is he gets the ball out quickly and accurately on guys who are able to get open on those little underneath routes really quickly. I think that's a huge problem. That's a nuisance. And I think Penn State did a good job turning that into a nuisance as opposed to a huge problem. For a guy of O'Connell's caliber, 29 for 58, exactly 50% completions, 356 yards, 6.1 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown. That's not a particularly good night. He is going to have, even if his yardage isn't as high, he's going to have a lot better nights than that. And I think there was just, I also think there was just an element of survive to this football game. And they did a good job surviving in this football game. Moving on to the next question from Spaceballs, the account. Ohio State impressively took down the number 5 team in the country in week 1, while Penn State struggled mightily against a team that is projected to be a 7-ish win team. Safe to say the gap is widening between us and the top of the pile. Something many of you might not know about me is I have a girlfriend who went to Ohio State, and at halftime, I basically had to drop everything I was doing and go watch the game because she was such a nervous wreck with how poorly Ohio State was performing. One of the quarterbacks in that game went 24 for 34, 223 yards, 6.6 yards per attempt, and 2 touchdowns. And that quarterback was the guy who I think is going to win the Heisman Trophy in C.J. Stroud. He had a less productive night than Sean Clifford did on 4 fewer attempts. So 3 fewer attempts. I'm sorry. So I actually disagree with the general premise of that question. I think Ohio State's defense played a great game, Matt. I think Notre Dame's offense probably made it easy for them to play a great game, but I still think they played well. I don't think Ohio State's offense was nearly as good as you expect out of Ohio State's offense. But as a general thing, to get to the last part of that question, yes, I think the gap between Penn State and Ohio State's really large this year. I think Ohio State is my pick to, at the bare minimum, make the national championship game. I think they're winning the Big Ten. I think they're making the playoff. I think they're winning their first playoff game. And then Lord knows what happens against a pissed off Alabama team.
Or Georgia, man. I don't know if you saw that one.
Or Georgia. Ooh,
Jesus.
Lord.
Jesus.
Bo Nix. Saying a prayer for you, my brother.
Bo Nix is what people think Sean Clifford is.
Boy, that's a very mean thing. That's so yeah. I don't think there is some perpetually growing gap between Penn State and Ohio State where like Penn State is just kind of stuck in an area between like Maryland and Michigan State or something like that. I think this is a really good Ohio State team. I think this Ohio State team is going to beat Penn State. I don't think Ohio State was nearly as good as you might think based on beat the number 5 team in the country. And I would also say, again, if I just read off the stat lines that CJ Stroud and Sean Clifford had on Saturday, over this weekend, you would take Sean Clifford's game over CJ Stroud's game 10 times out of 10. So those were just my general thoughts when I got that question. I apologize for rambling. I just had a bit of a different perspective as the person who is stuck in Columbus, Ohio. Matt, what do you have to say to that?
I mean, there's a gap. Ohio State outspends Penn State like a crazy amount. Like all their assistants.
No. You're not allowed to suggest that it might be a money thing. You have to suggest that it's because James Fraudlin is here and Ryan Day and Ryan Day is the second coming of he's offense Bill Parcells, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like Penn State doesn't just spend like Ohio State does. Like let's just call it how it is. Like they're at a different point in the program, and a lot of it is an interest thing. Like I forget where I was reading this, but like the pro teams being awful in Ohio for forever made Ohio State the biggest name in that state. Penn State is never going to be the biggest name in football in Pennsylvania because people love the Eagles and they love the Steelers. So right then and there, you're already at a disadvantage in that people aren't going to be as interested in you as they will be with the Buckeyes. And I don't want to get into this whole point. This feels like very off-season content. But the gap, is it widening? Yes, which makes any loss Ohio State suffers to a team within the Big Ten even more unacceptable to their fans, which is always really funny because these are 19, 20, and 22-year-olds playing a sport for free. So and there's a gap. I don't know if it's getting wider. I hope it's not. Go State, abandon the Big Ten East. Break up the divisions.
Yes. I texted my girlfriend that question and I said, I'm excited to reveal to the people I have a girlfriend who was melting down until basically midway through the fourth quarter. And she replied, that is a fair breakdown of what happened. It was a 2-score game. It was unacceptable, IMO. And then to that second point, as a Cleveland sports fan, all I ask for is my college team to dominate always because I need one good team. So
see, exactly. That's my point right there.
One thing I'm going to throw out there, we just got it. So did I even send these over to you, Matt? No, I didn't.
I haven't pulled up.
Oh, okay. So
I have the keys. I have the keys to blog Twitter too. Don't worry.
Yes. From Sean Steyer, this strict series by running back rotation is word I won't say on the podcast, but it begins with an F and rhymes with ducking. Miserable. It's actually a really good point. What did you think about that? Because I know during the game it was something that really, I will say, for lack of a better word, grinds my gears.
Yeah, I wasn't happy with it. But then Kayvon Lee goes out there and makes the play of the game. So
that's the thing. Like
it's not going anywhere.
We were frustrated about the running back by committee thing because it took snaps away from the freshmen and gave them to a guy in Kayvon Lee who we'll say is less aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I get why you're doing it. It's on the road. It's these freshmen's first college action. I get it. Frank Wood even said in the presser that he's going to keep riding the hot hand, and there was no hot hand. There was no big run. If one guy wanted to get the lion's share, you got to break the run. The runs maybe weren't there as often as we were hoping for, but there were definitely lanes that I think, Kayvon Lee specifically didn't hit for one reason or another. Mm-hmm. We're going to see it. Embrace it. Real quick, shout out Devin Ford. Great catch on fourth down, man. I want the world for that dude, for that kid, man. He is just what's like a special kid to be able to just stick it out and want to continue to make an impact, knowing that his role is going to be that gadget play on fourth down and pretty much it. So good for him, man. That's a cool moment from the game. But this isn't going anywhere. Maybe we'll see a little bit of a separation from the freshmen against Ohio, just because I think it'll be a blowout. But it's not great, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. And listen, if it keeps guys fresh, for maybe a have to potentially grind it out drive to seal a game in October or November, I'm fine with it if it preps them for that. So we'll have to just wait and see how it evolves.
That's fair. What I basically say is I have a hunch that it's going to go away if someone takes it.
Yep.
I do think it is that easy. If someone is able to go out there and say, this is my job, we're not going to get, this is a Nick drive, this is a Kayvon drive, this is a Katron drive, blah, 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 just over and over and over. If Nick Singleton or Katron Allen or Kayvon Lee can go out there and give Penn State 7 carries for 50 yards on a drive, it's their job. It is straight up their job. They're not going to do the rotation. I do find it a little annoying because the other side of that is, you're right, no one took the job.
Yep.
But also no one really got an opportunity to take the job. If you look at the snap counts, Katron Allen, and I'll add in the play total because I do find this very interesting. I'll actually go bottom to top. Devin Ford, 4 plays, all 4 of them were pass plays. Kayvon Lee, 23 plays, 14 pass plays, 9 rush plays. Nick Singleton, 24 plays, 12 and 12 split. Katron Allen, and this fascinated me, 28 total plays, 19 pass plays, 9 run plays. So
wow,
I think if you're just going off of that, 1, we see what Devin Ford's role is, obviously. 2, Kayvon Lee was in there primarily as a guy. He was a guy who they felt a little bit more comfortable on passing plays. I was fascinated in Katron Allen being out there for 10 more pass plays than he was run plays. And then Singleton seems like a guy they think they can be a little bit more balanced with. So once someone wins that job, they're taking it and they're going to have it. And then the other guys are just going to have to figure out how to work within those confines. But we will see this week against Ohio and then going forward what Penn State gets and what Penn State ends up doing. Last question that we got, this one is from Chris D'Amato. What would it take for Drew Aller to supplant Sean Clifford as the starter? Also, given the lack of progress with Sean, what's the team ceiling this year? You want to take one half of that first, and then I'll take the other half of that first, and you can go with whichever one you want?
Yeah. With Cliff and the way the roster's built and the fact that they have gotten past their first losable game, the ceiling is 11-1. I thought it was 10-2 going in. It's 11-1 now. So there's enough talent around. There's enough dudes who can catch the ball. 8 of them, which is a really good place to start, considering it was 4 at this point last season. The ceiling's 11. Probably not a playoff appearance, and I know that's what we're all clamoring for. I personally want one before the college football playoff expands to 12, but that can be a whole other podcast, my thoughts on that, which everyone says are bad. But the ceiling's 11 wins, and I'm not sure what the ceiling with Aller is. I think it can be higher, but I'm not sure if it can be higher as true freshman Drew Aller. I think second and third year Drew Aller raised that ceiling to that potentially special season. So right now the ceiling is very, very good. And that's kind of where I'll plant my flag there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing that Thomas Frankar of BWI mentioned. I was just goofing around on Twitter one day and I was saying that, based on one of his throws, this guy's the next Josh Allen, blah, 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 blah. And T. Frank made the point, a very good point, which is, yes, Josh Allen right now is one of the most uniquely talented quarterbacks in football, but he sucked for a few years. He needed to take a whole lot of lumps in order to get to a place where he could be this guy. So just that caveat, that grain of salt of, you can have it all, but you have to learn how to use it. And I actually do think that down the road, Drew Aller can be a national championship caliber quarterback. I just we haven't seen enough to see that. The thing with Sean Clifford, and this is the thing that keeps getting lost in the Sean Clifford dialogue, is that Penn State's won a New Year's Six game with him as a quarterback. Penn State has made and won the Cotton Bowl as gone 11-2. I think I think Levis started the last game, regular season game last year. But Penn State has achieved incredible highs with Sean Clifford as quarterback. And getting past this game, this very tricky game, with Clifford having the game that he did, where there was some good, there was some bad. I mean, the thing with Sean Clifford is that he's a college quarterback. Like, there are going to be stretches where he looks absolutely horrible, and then stretches where he looks like a guy who's able to get it done. There are a lot of guys at major programs who are like that. And the reason that Penn State's not a national championship caliber team is because of what happens in those bad moments with him. But the reason that Penn State can be a team that wins double-digit games is because of what he does in those good moments, his understanding of the offense, all those sorts of things. So that's what I'll basically say. I think the team ceiling this year is they could be a New Year's Six team. I won't put a win total on that, but I will say they could be a team that makes the New Year's Six. What would it take for Aller to supplant Sean as the starter? I truly believe it is an injury, or it is being bad in a specific way, because this is a conversation that we had a little bit earlier today with some friends, Matt. Like, do we really think that they would put Drew Aller in as Penn State's quarterback if the defense can't stop if the offense is scoring, the defense can't stop anything, and as a result, they're losing games, 42-38. I don't think so. I think they'd keep Clifford in and let him keep putting up numbers as, he's ending his Penn State career. If the offense struggles, but it's because the offensive line can't potentially block anyone, are they going to put Drew Aller out there and potentially develop Christian Hackenberg syndrome? I don't think they would do that. So this is where my issue with this conversation comes in. From a pure football perspective, I need to know the context under which people want Drew Aller to be Penn State's quarterback. And then I can say whether or not I think he can get the job. But as of right now, the one thing I am very confident in saying is that if Sean Clifford gets hurt, and this is a step forward for Aller. This is a step forward for Aller. If Sean Clifford gets hurt, I think Drew Aller should be the guy. Coming into the season, I thought it was Christian Veilleux. I thought he should have been the guy who's been out there and has known what to do. We saw a couple of glimpses for him, Aller, and I want to see him continue to build on those in very controlled settings. Mm-hmm. That's why I think what he has done so far is progress. But as of right now, the only way I will say Drew Aller should supplant Sean Clifford as starter, because of how big that conversation is, how many things potentially go into it, is Sean Clifford gets hurt. I don't think Penn State's a national championship contender if Drew Aller takes over for Sean Clifford this year. I don't think Drew Aller playing this year necessarily impacts Penn State's ability to win a national championship next year or the year after that with him in town.
That's all fair. My lone pushback is you made the point that there are college quarterbacks all over the country who play like Sean Clifford. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad. We think Drew Aller is the kind of quarterback not every college in the country has. And I know we haven't seen enough. We have not. 4 passes is not enough, even though 3 of them were beautiful. Really, really, especially that one to Tyler Warren that he dropped. That was one of the best throws I've seen. And considering that throw happened on September 1st of his true freshman season, makes me think he has it. He has capital I it. I think we can have this conversation in October. I think after Central Michigan, I think after we've seen extended run of him, hopefully against Ohio and Central Michigan, I think we have to have this conversation. Because right now, what are we all kind of snickering at? Is it in the Michigan situation that Cade McNamara wins games, but McCarthy's better? Are we headed to that? And do we want to head to that? Or do we rip the Band-Aid off? even if it hurts us in the short term, to benefit us in the long term. And again, this isn't a conversation I want to get into. I don't really know where I stand yet on this. Like, I have to see multiple drives of Drew Aller before I can have this opinion. But from those 4 throws, that series, and from the fact that he is the 5-star, if Penn State's ever going to win a national title, it's with a guy with the pedigree of Drew Aller. So it's just such a unique situation to be in. And again, we can do a whole podcast on this. Maybe we will one day this week or next week. But I think it's going to take a lot to get it to happen. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that this change could happen at some point this season.
Yeah, I mean, the only way I can see after Central Michigan having this is like a serious conversation. And again, it does not matter if we are having this conversation. Like, it does not matter at all. What matters is what James Franklin, what Mike Yursich, what people with Penn State's office think. The only way I could see this being a conversation people that they seriously have is if Clifford leaves the Auburn game, Aller comes in and wins them that football game. That is the only way I could see it happen. Truly the only way I could see it happening. Otherwise,
well, then, at that point, it's not a conversation. You do it.
Yeah.
If he wins the Auburn game, it's not a conversation. Aller's your starter. If Aller comes in and wins them the Auburn game, it's not a conversation. That's a decision already.
And again, it depends on how he does it. If he's just a handoff merchant and then he completes a few throws on like 3rd and 4s over the middle, like, that's one thing. If he's actually going out there and straight up winning the game, then yeah, it becomes something else that we talk about. But I truly do not see a scenario where between where we are now and in the lead up to the Northwestern game on October 1st, where Aller is going to be able to just straight up take the job away. And that's what I think it comes down to. He has to take the job, because you look at that schedule and it just nothing in there lends itself to me to Sean Clifford is going to do so much bad stuff, so much inexplicable stuff, so much hurting Penn State stuff, that he is going to outright lose it. And when Aller plays against Ohio and Central Michigan, assuming that happens, it's going to be because Sean Clifford got him in a position to play. So that's where I think this becomes tricky. It's something that we're going to be talking about throughout the season, I'm sure. But again, it doesn't matter unless James Franklin goes out there and decides he wants to have this conversation.
Real quick, can I say something on that Ohio game real quick?
Go ahead.
I have never heard, and I've been to Franklin press conferences. I did them for 2.5 years while with the blog when we were a written medium. Franklin made a comment in the post-game presser against Purdue that he's hoping to give Aller run in the Ohio game. He has never made a statement like that, like assuming that it's going to be a blowout. I think no matter what, we're going to see Aller. I think no matter, even if it's tied, I think they're going to let Drew Aller get a couple series. I have never heard Franklin make a statement implying a blowout ever in my life. Like, I've never heard him say a comment remotely close to that. I think he kind of tipped his hand there a little bit with that verbiage. And I think we're going to have to see Drew Aller get a couple drives, not in garbage time in that game. Like, I've never heard him say something like that before.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see Aller no matter what. Which hits the over on the 1.5 games I have him playing in. So that was good timing for me.
Yeah, I hope Christian Veilleux's okay, because it's unless it legitimately was just straight up Drew Aller winning the quarterback job, which cool for him. Mm-hmm. Great for him. Any final things you want to add before we end this episode of the pod?
No, that's all I got. Are we doing game balls?
Oh, we should do game balls. I forgot about that. My bad. Game balls. Let's hand them out. We'll do what Penn State did. One offense, one defense, one special team. So you're giving them two.
Oh, I want to do more.
Well, nah. Because
I know.
Then we'll just sit here and just hand them out to a bunch of different guys. But yeah, go ahead.
Brenton Strange deserves love, but I can't give it to him. Olu deserves love. I can't give it to him. I'm going to give offense to Keandre Lambert-Smith. I know we had a couple bad drops, but the story with him has always been all the talent's there. It's just that once he makes a mistake, he lets it spiral. Going out there and scoring that touchdown, I think, is going to be a launching point. So offense, give me Keandre Lambert-Smith. Defensively, Daquan Hardy. I don't think we mentioned him yet somehow. Daquan Hardy is that dude. He made big play after big play. He plays like he's 6'5", despite the fact that he's 5'9". He deserves the world, man. I'm so happy Penn State took him in their class. And I'm really excited to watch his role continue to develop. And special teams. I'm not going to give it to Barney Amore, believe it or not. I'm not going to give it to Jake Pinniger, believe it or not. This is going to go to Dominic DeLuca for tackling Charlie Jones on that last kickoff after Penn State scored the game-winning touchdown, because for years, every kickoff was a touchback, and the coverage team never really got that much game action, and the kick was to the reigning Big Ten returner of the year, and Dom DeLuca brought him down inside the 15, I believe. So a play that will never really be talked about ever, but for Dom DeLuca, walk-on, redshirt freshman, to come out there on the road, bring down the Big Ten returner of the year, set that offense back a little bit further than they would have wanted, and set up that drive in favor of the defense, is a play that I think had immense value. So just big shout out to Dom DeLuca. That's a play that, again, will be forgotten to the sands of time, like we all will eventually. But that was a cool moment.
Offense, I'm going to give it to Mitchell Tinsley. I mean, I'm in love with this dude. I think that when Parker Washington catches a football, I think he can be a little bit too liable to trying to like shake dudes and get around them. Keandre Lambert-Smith is up and down with catching footballs, but like you mentioned, made a big play. Mitchell Tinsley goes out there, he snags the football, and then he plants his foot, turns upfield, and goes and wants to attack a defense and get guys on their heels. I mean, it was like, I'm really impressed by him. I think that he's going to end up being Penn State's best wide receiver this season. Defense, I've waxed poetic about him already. I think Joey Porter Jr. had a phenomenal game. And then I will say Barney Amore. I mean, I think that considering he had to win the punting job on the heels of Jordan Stout doing such an excellent job last season, I thought he was phenomenal. I mean, it's going to get lost to it because Penn State's coverage team knocked it into the end zone, but he literally dropped a ball that landed flat on the half-yard line. And,
unreal punt, man. Great for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a really stellar game in his first game, in a game where field position was really important with how Purdue can move the ball, so I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Any final thoughts, Matt?
That's all I got. 1-0, excited for Ohio, see what that has in store. And excited we get a nooner. I love, they're 11 a.m. local time here in Chicago, and that is a phenomenal kickoff time.
Yeah, I will be in a wedding this weekend.
Oh,
and
nice.
This game is also at the exact same time as Manchester City against Tottenham. So I apologize to the groom. I'm going to be distracted. Thank you to everyone for listening to this edition of the podcast. As always, make sure you go and subscribe wherever you go and get your podcasts. If you use Apple Podcasts, you use Spotify, please make sure you're leaving us a 5-star review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please head into the comments and be cool, because YouTube is a very mean place sometimes, and people don't deserve that. If you want to, make sure you follow us on all of our various social media channels, and make sure if you are a new customer to use the promo code Roar Lions Roar for 15% off of your first home field apparel order. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.